The night was cold, and the wind was sharp like tiny knives in the dark. Ray stood behind his small diner, tossing trash bags into the metal bin. Steam from the kitchen floated into the alley. But it couldn't warm the frozen ground. The streets were quiet, and most shops had closed hours ago. He rubbed his hands together, ready to go inside and lock up for the night. But then he heard it, a soft clatter, like something metal falling. He turned quickly, thinking maybe a raccoon or a cleaning drone was rummaging through the trash. Instead, he saw a small shadow move behind the bins. Then another, smaller one. "Who's there?" Ray called out, his voice unsure but firm. No answer. Just the sound of hurried breathing. Ray slowly walked toward the noise, keeping his steps light. Then he stopped. Two girls were crouched near the trash. Not human. Their skin was pale purple. Glowing slightly under the street lamp, they had thin arms, tangled red hair, and large bright eyes that looked terrified. The older one moved in front of the younger one, shielding her like a wall. Ray raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." The younger girl trembled, holding a crushed food wrapper. Close to her chest, the older one finally spoke, her voice dry and cracked. "Please, we're not stealing, just hungry." Ray stared at them, shocked. They were just kids. No shoes, thin clothes, and their fingers red from cold. His heart clenched. Something about the way the little one looked at the trash, like it was treasure, made his chest hurt. He looked back at the diner, then at the girls. He could just call security and let them handle it. That would be easy, but something inside him said no. He had worked as a cook for 20 years, seen all kinds of people come and go, but never anything like this. "You two want something warm to eat?" he asked gently. The older girl didn't answer right away. She looked back at her sister, who nodded quickly, eyes wide with hope. Ray opened the back door and held it open. "Come on in." They didn't move, still unsure if it was a trap. But then the little one stepped forward. Slowly, the older girl followed, keeping one hand on her back protectively. Inside, the diner lights were dim, the floor clean, the chairs upturned for closing. Ray guided them to a corner booth and turned the heater on near them. "Sit there. I'll bring something," he said, walking into the kitchen. He quickly put together 2 bowls of thick soup and cut slices of warm bread. He added cheese and even found 2 apples in the fridge. When he returned, the girls hadn't moved. He placed the food on the table. "Eat," he said with a smile. "It's on the house." The little one dug in immediately, stuffing bread into her mouth with shaking hands. The older girl ate slower, watching Ray with cautious eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. She paused, then said, "Kayla." He looked at the younger one. "And you?" Kayla answered. "For Aniri?" Ray nodded. "I'm Ray. I run this place." The girls didn't say much, but their eyes said everything. Ray didn't ask too many questions. Not yet. He just watched them eat, their cheeks filling with color as the warmth returned to their bodies. After a while, Neri leaned against Kayla and fell asleep. Kayla looked at Ray, her voice soft. "Thank you." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. Not yet." He got up and brought a blanket from the storage room. Kayla looked confused. "You can sleep in the back room," he said. "It's warm and safe." Kayla hesitated. "Only tonight." Ray paused, then said, "As long as you need." That night, Ray sat in the empty diner, staring out the window. The stars above the colony world blinked quietly. He didn't know where these girls had come from, but he knew they were running from something, and now they were his responsibility. The smell of soup still hung in the air. The diner was quiet, except for the soft hum of the heater. Ray sat in the kitchen, sipping his own coffee, thinking about what had just happened. 2 alien girls alone in the night, digging through trash. He had no idea where they came from. But one thing was clear. They were scared and starving. Ray peeked into the back storage room. Kayla was sitting upright. Holding her sister close under the blanket, Neri was sleeping. One hand still clutching a piece of bread like a treasure. Ray smiled softly. Then walked back into the kitchen. He wasn't a hero, just a cook. But something told him this wasn't just about food. It was about survival. The next morning, Ray unlocked the diner early. He didn't know if the girls would still be there. But when he stepped inside, he found Kayla awake, cleaning the small floor space with a rag. Neri was sitting nearby, watching her with sleepy eyes. "You don't have to do that," Ray said, surprised. Kayla stood up quickly, almost in panic. "We want to stay useful," she said. Ray raised an eyebrow. "You're not workers, you're guests." Kayla looked down, unsure how to respond. Ray sighed and said, "Let's get you some real breakfast." He made scrambled eggs, fried 2 pieces of toast, and poured warm berry tea into mugs. He placed the plates in front of the girls, who stared at the food like it was gold. Neri took a bite and gasped. "It's soft," she whispered, surprised. Kayla tasted hers slowly, chewing every bite like it might disappear. Ray sat across from them, watching without speaking. "What happened to you two?" he finally asked. Kayla didn't answer right away. She looked at Neri, who had begun to smile between bites. Then she said, "We ran, from where?" Ray asked gently. Kayla looked toward the window, her voice quiet, "From a bad place." Ray didn't push for more. But inside, his heart tightened. He had seen those kinds of eyes before on soldiers, on war survivors, but never on children. After breakfast, Ray gave Neri a pencil and some paper from the drawer. She started drawing quickly, her tiny hands moving like she hadn't touched paper in years. Kayla sat nearby, still alert, still watching the door. Ray noticed how her eyes flicked toward every sound, how her muscles stayed tense even when she sat. She wasn't just hungry. She was trained to run later that day. A customer walked in early. Ray told the girls to stay hidden in the back. The man ordered coffee and a sandwich, then sat by the window. Ray served him and kept an eye on the storage door. When the man left, Ray locked the door again and took a deep breath. "This won't be easy," he muttered. Kayla stepped out quietly. "Do people know we're here?" Ray shook his head. "Not yet." He brought out some clothes from an old lost and found box. They didn't fit perfectly, but they were better than rags. Kayla dressed Neri first, wrapping her in a thick jacket and wool socks. Ray noticed how carefully she moved, like she was used to hiding bruises or pain. "Where are your parents?" Ray asked softly. Kayla didn't answer. Ray didn't ask again that night. Ray cooked a special dinner, spicy rice with grilled meat and vegetables. He served it on clean plates and even lit a small table light. Neri clapped her hands, excited. Kayla just stared, unsure why he was being so kind. Ray sat down with them, and for a few moments, they ate like a family. Kayla finally asked, "Why are you helping us?" Ray looked at her, serious but kind, because no one else did. He replied. Kayla's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Her walls were still up. But there was a crack in them now. After dinner, Neri showed her drawing to Ray. It was a picture of him, Kayla, and herself sitting at a table with food underneath. She had written in messy letters, "Thank you, Mr. Ray." He smiled, and something in his chest warmed. It had been a long time since anyone drew him in a picture. Kayla helped clean up, washing dishes and wiping the counters. Ray didn't stop her. She needed to feel in control of something before they went to sleep. Ray gave them each a clean pillow and folded towels. Kayla whispered, "We won't forget." Ray turned off the lights, walking back into the diner alone. He sat at a booth and looked outside. The stars were still out, but now they felt less cold. Something had changed. This place, once quiet and empty, now had life in it again. It wasn't just a meal he gave them. It was hope. Ray didn't sleep much that night. He kept thinking about Kayla and Neri in the storage room, curled up together under a blanket. The wind howled outside the diner, but inside it was quiet and warm. He had questions, many of them, but none seemed more important than this one. Were the girls safe now? Early the next morning, before the sun rose, Ray stepped into the storage room. He moved quietly, not wanting to scare them. Kayla was already awake, sitting up against the wall with her arms around Neri. The blanket had fallen off her shoulders, and her eyes were wide open, watching the door. "You didn't sleep?" Ray asked. Kayla shook her head slowly. "I can't. Not unless I know she's safe," she said. Ray understood that kind of fear. He set down 2 cups of warm tea and sat near the door. "You don't have to worry here," he said. "No one's going to hurt you." Kayla looked at him with tired eyes. She wanted to believe him, but she had been lied to before. Ray tried to change the subject. "You ever seen a real toaster before?" he asked, smiling. Kayla blinked, confused. Ray chuckled and pointed to the small old toaster in the kitchen. "It pops your bread into the air like magic." Neri woke up then, yawned, and smiled when she saw Ray. She ran to him and hugged his leg without warning. Ray froze for a second, then gently patted her back. "You hungry, little one?" he asked. Neri nodded quickly. Ray stood up. "Then let's get breakfast started." He made toasted bread with butter and honey, a rare treat on this colony. The girls ate happily. Even Kayla smiled just a little, but Ray's smile faded when he picked up the blanket they had slept in. Something metallic fell out from between the folds. He bent down and picked it up. It was a small silver tag, about the size of a dog tag, but it wasn't from Earth. It had alien writing burned into its symbols from the Imperial Slave Registry. Ray's hand tightened around it. He had heard about these tags before, once attached. They marked the child as owned property, not a person. Ray looked at Kayla quietly, not saying anything. She noticed and froze. Her eyes dropped to the tag in his hand. Slowly, she stood up, her body tense, ready to grab Neri and run, but Ray didn't move. He walked over to the stove, placed the tag gently in a drawer, and closed it. "You dropped something," he said calmly. Kayla's shoulders fell, but she didn't speak. Ray turned around and added, "Doesn't matter to me what you were, only what you are now." Kayla looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "Thank you." The rest of the day passed quietly. Ray didn't ask more questions, and the girls didn't offer answers. But something between them had shifted. Trust was beginning to grow, slowly, like a small seed in hard soil. Later that evening, 2 men in dark uniforms entered the diner. Ray looked up from behind the counter, his heart suddenly tight. They weren't soldiers but local patrol officers, the kind who handled civil problems. One of them flashed a badge and said, "Evening, sir. We're checking for reports of missing minors." Ray kept his face calm. "Missing minors?" The officer nodded. 2 alien girls were seen near the wastelands last night. Possibly runaways. The other officer leaned on the counter. "You seen anything unusual? Anyone suspicious?" Ray smiled like he had nothing to hide. "Only thing unusual around here is the price of cheese." The officers chuckled, but kept looking around the room. "Mind if we check the back?" one asked casually. Ray shook his head. "Health code rules. No one except staff in the kitchen or storage." The officers looked at each other, then back at Ray. "All right, if you see anything, call us," they said, sliding a contact card across the counter. Ray nodded. "Sure thing, officer." As soon as they left, Ray locked the front door and rushed to the back room. Kayla and Neri were hiding behind boxes, completely silent. Ray knelt down and whispered, "You're okay." "They're gone." Kayla didn't cry, but her hands were shaking. Ray gently placed both hands on her shoulders. "I won't let them take you." That night, Ray brought out an old mattress and placed it in the storage room. He added extra blankets and even found a toy from the lost and found box, and old stuffed bear. Neri hugged it like it was a real friend. Kayla finally laid down beside her sister, but before she closed her eyes, she said something soft, almost too quiet to hear. "You're the first adult who didn't sell us." Ray didn't know what to say, so he just sat by the door, keeping watch while they slept. Outside, the cold wind blew across the empty alley. But inside the diner, for one night at least, the warmth stayed. The diner lights were low. Outside, the sky was dark, filled with heavy clouds. Ray washed the dishes quietly, listening to the rain tap the windows. Kayla and Neri were in the storage room, reading a picture book he had found in the lost and found box. Things had been peaceful for a few days. But something in Ray's gut told him that peace never lasted long. He had seen the patrol officers twice since that night, once walking by the diner, slowly peering through the glass, another time just sitting in a hover truck across the street, pretending not to watch. Ray knew the signs. He had done business on the edge of the law before. Someone had told them something, and now they were waiting for proof. Ray moved fast. He installed a hidden lock on the back freezer door and cleared space behind some large crates. If something happened, the girls could hide there. It would be freezing, but it was better than getting caught that night. Ray didn't close the diner at the usual time. Instead, he left a light on and kept the place looking open. Kayla noticed right away, something's wrong. She whispered. Ray nodded. "We may have company." Suddenly, the sound of boots echoed outside. Then came the knock, 3 hard bangs on the metal door. Ray opened it slowly, finding 2 patrol officers in full armor this time. Their faces were serious, eyes cold. "Evening," one of them said. "We got reports of movement near your alley." Ray forced a smile. "Probably just stray dogs or trash drones. We'll have to take a look," the officer said. Stepping forward, Ray held out a hand. "I told you, back areas for staff only." The taller officer flashed a digital warrant. "Not tonight." Ray's heart sank, but he didn't show it. "Give me a second to shut off the stoves," he said calmly. He walked back into the kitchen, then ducked into the storage room. "Now," he whispered, "go into the freezer and stay quiet." Kayla grabbed Neri and moved fast, her eyes sharp. Ray opened the freezer, and the cold hit like ice needles. Kayla hesitated, her body shivering. "All ready, you'll be okay," Ray said, placing a blanket inside, "just for a little while." He shut the door, locking it from the outside. By the time he turned around, the officers were inside the diner.
"Scanning everything. What?"
"In there?" one of them asked, pointing toward the back. "Just cold storage," Ray answered. "Frozen meat, nothing else." They stepped past him, walking toward the door. Ray stood in their way. "You planning to take frozen steaks into custody too?" he said with a chuckle. The taller one didn't laugh. Instead, he narrowed his eyes. "We've had 3 reports. Cook, if you're hiding fugitives," Ray cut him off. "I've been working this grill for 20 years, and the only thing I hide is my secret chili recipe." A tense silence followed. Then, the shorter officer finally shrugged. "Nothing here." They turned and walked out, boots heavy on the floor. Ray waited until the sound faded completely, then rushed to the freezer. He unlocked it and opened the door. Kayla and Neri were huddled together, teeth chattering, faces pale, but they were safe. Ray helped them out quickly and wrapped them in warm towels. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." Neri started crying. Not from pain, but from fear. Kayla didn't say anything, but she didn't let go of Ray's arm either. They sat near the heater, wrapped in blankets, the heat slowly warming them back to life. Ray sat beside them, staring at the floor. He knew now he couldn't keep doing this alone. Later that night, once the girls were asleep again, Ray opened an old box from under the diner counter. Inside was a cracked communicator, a data chip, and a long-lost contact list from years ago. Ray plugged in the chip, scrolling through names he hadn't seen in ages. Then he found it Taz Rigo, a former smuggler. Someone who owed Ray a big favor. Ray stared at the name for a long time, then tapped the button. A low voice answered after a few seconds. "Who's asking?" "Old friend," Ray said. "I need safe passage for 2 kids." Off-world, silence. Then a sigh. "You never ask for small things, do you?" "I'll pay," Ray said, "or trade." "Whatever it takes," the voice replied. "All right, I'll send you coordinates. One night only." Ray ended the call and leaned back in his chair. He looked toward the storage room door. He had just crossed a line. He wasn't just hiding 2 hungry girls anymore. He was helping them escape. Tomorrow, they would run. But tonight, he would stand guard. Because now, this diner wasn't just a place to eat. It was a shelter, a shield, and maybe, just maybe, a home. The diner was quiet again, but not peaceful. Ray moved through the kitchen with purpose, checking every bolt, every hidden corner. The patrols had come too close, and now he knew they wouldn't stop until the girls were caught or gone. He had made up his mind the night before he would get Kayla and Neri off this planet. But until the smuggler arrived, they had to stay hidden. Really hidden. In the far corner of the diner's basement was a rusted door. One even Ray hadn't opened in years. Behind it was an old supply room used back when the building served as a military outpost. Ray pulled the heavy door open with effort, coughing as dust filled the air. It was small, with thick metal walls, and no windows perfect. For the next 2 hours, Ray worked without stopping. He cleaned the floor, replaced a broken light, and set up a cot he found in storage. He brought in water jugs, canned food, and even added a small heater. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe when Kayla came down to check on him. Her eyes widened. "What is this?" she asked. Ray looked up from the blanket he was folding. "It's yours," he said. "A place no one can find." Kayla stepped inside slowly, running her fingers along the cold wall. "It feels like a bunker," she whispered. Ray nodded. "It was once." She looked at him, unsure what to say. But the look in her eyes, half amazement, half disbelief, said everything. Later that day, Ray brought Neri down to show her the room. She gasped with joy, running around like it was a castle. "There's a bed," she shouted, "and a chair, and snacks." Ray smiled, feeling something warm rise in his chest. It wasn't just a hiding place. To them, it was a gift. In the following days, Ray taught the girls new things. He showed Kayla how to use the grill, how to slice vegetables, and how to fold napkins the human way. She took it seriously, like it was a mission. Neri, on the other hand, learned how to wipe tables and draw chalk menus on the old board outside. Together, they made the place feel alive. Ray knew it couldn't last forever, but for a little while, it felt like a family. He even found himself laughing again, real loud laughs he hadn't felt in years. The kind that made your chest ache in a good way. One evening, just as the sun was setting, a man entered the diner. He had a long coat, a scruffy beard, and a cybernetic eye that glowed dim blue. Ray recognized him instantly. Taz Rigo, the smuggler. He walked up to the counter and leaned close. "You sure about this?" Taz asked quietly. Ray nodded. "They deserve a life." Taz sighed. "You always had a soft heart for lost causes." Kayla peeked from the kitchen, her body stiff. Taz noticed and whispered, "That her?" "She's just a kid," Ray replied. "And the little one?" Ray didn't answer, just pointed toward the back. Taz leaned back, crossing his arms. "I can move them. One-way ticket to Free Wind Colony. No questions asked." Ray handed him a small metal box, his life savings, hidden under the diner floor. For 10 years, Taz waited in his hand, then nodded. I'll send the location tomorrow night. Be ready. That night, Kayla couldn't sleep. She sat at the booth near the window, watching the stars. Ray joined her with 2 cups of warm tea. You scared? He asked. Kayla shook her head. Not for me. Ray waited, letting the silence settle. Then she added, I don't want to leave you behind. Ray looked out the window. You're not leaving me, he said softly. You're finding your own sky. Kayla blinked fast. Hiding the tears that threatened to come, you're not like the others, she said. Ray smiled. I'm just a cook. No, she whispered. You're more than that. The next day passed like a blur. Ray didn't open the diner. Instead, he cooked a full meal: roast chicken, baked vegetables, warm rolls, and real sweet pudding. He set the table like it was a celebration, because, in a way, it was. Kayla wore a clean shirt and Neri braided her hair for the first time. They sat at the table like honored guests. Ray served them one by one, smiling with every plate. This, he said, is a meal you'll never forget. Neri giggled. It's the best dinner ever. Kayla didn't speak, but her eyes glistened as she looked around. This wasn't a goodbye, was a thank you. A quiet moment between people who had saved each other in different ways that night. Ray walked into the secret room and checked every bag twice. He made sure the girls had warm clothes, water, and the drawing Neri made of them all, eating together. He kissed both their heads gently. Tomorrow, he whispered, you fly. And when he turned off the light, he stood alone in the hallway, the diner dark. The stars outside blinking softly. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but for now, it had given them something they'd never had before, a place to belong. Asterisk Ray stood behind the counter, wiping the same spot over and over. His mind wasn't on cleaning, it was on the message that had arrived on his old communicator. Taz had sent the location. The ship would leave in 24 hours, no second chances. Kayla and Neri were in the secret room below. Packing the few things Ray had given them, they didn't ask questions, they just knew it was time. Ray looked up when the diner door jingled. It was late, and he hadn't unlocked the front but someone had bypassed the lock anyway. The man who entered wasn't a stranger. It was Councilman Drevik, a regular customer who always asked for extra mustard and never tipped. He was dressed too well for a rainy night. Ray didn't like the way he smiled, like he already owned the room. Evening, Drevik said, his voice oily and fake. You're closed, Ray replied. Not smiling. Yes. But I thought we should talk, Drevik said. Walking to the counter like he belonged there, he leaned close and whispered, about. The girl's Ray's stomach dropped. He didn't respond. Drevik reached into his coat and placed a photo on the counter. It showed Kayla, blurry but clear enough, walking into the diner's back door. I didn't take this, Drevik said. But someone did, and now they want to report it. Ray's eyes narrowed. What do you want? He asked slowly. Drevik shrugged. I want peace and quiet. And you want to keep those two safe? He tapped the photo gently. I can make this disappear. He said, all you have to do is give me something in return. Ray clenched his jaw. What? Drevik smiled like a wolf. There's a list of rebel contacts I need smuggled off-world. He said, no questions, no delays. He leaned even closer. Do it for me, and the girls stay invisible. Ray stared at him, then said coldly, you're using them as leverage. Drevik nodded without shame. Call it insurance. Ray didn't punch him. He wanted to, but instead, he said, I'll think about it. Drevik stood up and adjusted his coat. Don't take too long, he said. Time's running out. After he left, Ray locked the door and slumped against it. He closed his eyes and breathed in slowly. The choice was heavy. Do the job and become part of Drevik's dirty game, or send the girls away and risk everything, including himself. Downstairs, Kayla was waiting. She stood at the door like a soldier guarding something precious. Ray walked in slowly, and Kayla noticed his face. "What happened?" she asked, voice sharp. "Trouble," Ray said. "Big trouble." He told her everything about Drevik, the photo, and the offer. Kayla didn't interrupt. When he was done, she said, "Don't do it." Ray looked surprised, but it would. "Keep you safe." Kayla stepped forward. "Not like that." Ray sat down on the crate and rubbed his eyes. "I can't lose you too." Kayla kneeled beside him. "You saved us," she said softly. "Now let us save you." Ray shook his head. "Your kids?" Kayla looked him in the eye. "We were property, Ray, not kids." "Not for a long time." Her voice didn't tremble. "We don't want to be the reason you become someone you hate." That night, Ray made a plan. He called Taz again and said, "New pickup spot." Taz cursed on the other end. "That's dangerous," Ray replied. "So is losing them." They changed the meeting point to a remote hangar, far from the patrol zones it would take longer to reach. And the route was full of checkpoints, but it was the only way to move without being seen. Ray gave the girls warm coats, food packs, a tiny beacon hidden in Neri's shoe. He also handed Kayla a small laser cutter. "Just in case," he said. Kayla nodded without asking questions. She understood. Before they left, Ray cooked one last meal. Nothing fancy, just soup and fresh bread. They sat at the booth like they always did, but this time they ate slowly. Trying to make time move slower, Neri leaned on Ray's shoulder. "Will we ever come back?" she asked. Ray looked down at her and smiled sadly. "You'll always have a place here." Kayla stood near the door, already thinking ahead. She was ready, even if her heart wasn't. Ray walked them to the back exit and knelt beside them. He gave Kayla a note and whispered, "If anything happens, open this when you're safe." Kayla placed it in her pocket and nodded. No words, just understanding. They disappeared into the dark alley, the rain falling gently on their coats. Ray stood there long after they were gone. His hands clenched into fists, his heart heavy. Drevik might still try something, but Ray had made his choice. He would protect them even if it meant putting himself in danger. They had become more than just two lost girls. They were his family now. And family, real family, is worth everything. The sky was still dark when Ray left the diner. He wore a thick coat, cap pulled low, and kept his head down as he walked through the alley. The streets were almost empty, but the air felt tense, like something dangerous was hiding in the silence. He checked his old wrist. Comagentes had confirmed the pickup, Hangar 12, in the abandoned cargo zone. Far from patrol scanners, he had packed the girls' bags the night before, slipped in extra rations, and placed Neri's drawing at the top. It showed all three of them, holding hands under the diner sign. Under it, she had written, "Uncle." Ray's home in shaky letters. Kayla and Neri followed behind him. Both wearing oversized coats, Kayla held Neri's hand tightly, and every few steps she looked over her shoulder. Ray kept his pace steady, heart pounding harder with every corner they turned. The cargo zone was half collapsed, rusted metal and broken walls everywhere. Old cranes stood like skeletons in the shadows, but far ahead, a soft blue light blinked the ship. Taz was leaning on the landing gear, chewing a stick of synth mint. He waved once, then turned serious when he saw the girls. "You weren't joking," he said quietly. Ray nodded. "Get them to Freewind, no stops." Taz opened the cargo ramp. "It's already set." Kayla stepped forward, but stopped just before the ramp. She turned to Ray, her eyes wide and full of something she hadn't shown before. Fear. Ray placed his hands on her shoulders. "You're not running anymore," he said. "You're flying." Neri ran back and hugged Ray's leg tightly. "Will we see you again?" she asked. Ray crouched beside her and whispered, "You'll see me in the stars. Every time you look up." Taz gave the signal. It was time. Kayla and Neri stepped onto the ramp. And it slowly began to rise. Ray waved once. Kayla raised her hand but didn't speak. She didn't have to. Then shouting, red lights, flared patrol, drones. Someone had tipped them off. Run? Ray shouted, pulling his old sidearm from his coat. Taz slammed the ship's outer panel, sealing the girls inside. Go, go. Ray yelled, stepping between the patrols and the ramp. The soldiers raised their weapons. Shouting orders, Ray dropped his weapon slowly, raising his hands. I'm alone. He yelled, there's no one else here. Inside the ship, Kayla looked through the small window. She saw Ray standing still, hands raised. She reached for the door panel, ready to open it, but Taz grabbed her wrist. Don't, he said. You open that door, and they'll take you too. Kayla's face twisted with anger and pain, but she nodded. Taz started the engines. The ship began to lift, wind blasting through the hangar. The patrols backed off slightly, covering their eyes. Ray smiled through the chaos. He didn't move. He just watched the ship rise, higher and higher, until it disappeared through the hangar roof. Only then did he let his knees hit the ground. The patrols rushed in, grabbing him, shouting in his ears. But he didn't fight. He had already won. Weeks later, on the peaceful green world of Freewind Colony, Kayla stood behind a small food stall. She served hot soup to a long line of customers, refugees, orphans, travelers with tired eyes. Beside her, Neri laughed as she handed out bread wrapped in napkins covered in little doodles. On the front of the stall was a sign, hand-painted by Neri herself, Ray's kitchen food for the lost each evening. Kayla lit a small candle near a photo they had saved. It was of Ray, standing in front of his diner, arms crossed, grumpy face, but soft eyes. People asked sometimes, was he your father? Kayla always smiled and said, he was our light. Then, one day, a letter arrived. Old paper, rough edges. Inside was a single note, written in Ray's handwriting. Still cooking, still waiting. You're always welcome home. Kayla held the letter to her chest and whispered, we'll come back one day, but for now, we feed others like he fed us. And so the story of a human cook and two lost alien girls became something more. Not just a memory, but a legacy. One bowl of soup at a time.